pani sa re ma pani sa ga re pa ma ma ga re sa ga sa ma pani sa re ma pani sa ga re pa ma ma ga re sa ga ma ga re ni pa ma ma pani ga re ma ga re sa ni sa ma pani sa re ma pani sa ga re pa ma ma ga re sa ga ma ga re ni pa ma ma pani ga re ma ga re sa ni sa ga re ma ga re sa ni pa pani sa ma pani sa re.
Janani Janmabhumischa Swargadapi Gariyasi. To us, the motherland is as important as the mother who has given birth to us. In fact, it is the motherland that carries both us and the mother who has given birth to us. So, Janmabhoomi is very important. And to develop the love, respect, and responsibility towards one's motherland, it is very, very important that we understand the civilization in which we are born into. So as a part of this objective, we are now understanding the Indian architecture. So let us continue. Well, after the Mauryas, the Shungas and the Guptas, and especially with the decline of the Guptas, the Chalukya dynasty was established in the south. So Karnataka, Andhra, Maharashtra and Gujarat, these four states largely covered the influence of the Chalukyas. In the Chalukya dynasty, some kings who will find a mention here, Pulikeshin I. So he roughly ruled between 540 and 566 AD. Generally for kings, when we give dates, we give only their time of regime. We may or may not know their exact year of birth. We may or may not know their exact year of death. So the regime period is what is very important. 540 to 566 CE, he took control of Badami. So Badami is a place in Karnataka, and that was the erstwhile capital of the Chalukyas. So the Chalukyas, when we deal with them, I will make a mention here. These are the Chalukyas of Badami. So there were Chalukyas elsewhere called as the Kalyani Chalukyas, then there were the Eastern Chalukyas, there were the Western Chalukyas. So I'm just leaving it here. We have got Chalukyas who even ruled the Telugu country. So here they were the Badami Chalukyas. So followed by the rule of Pulikeshin I came the king called Pulikeshin II between 609 and 642 AD. So there were kings in between. I'm just taking some prominent ones. So this Pulikeshin II was married to the princesses of Alupa and Western Ganga dynasty. So Western Ganga dynasty falls slightly below. We will be dealing with Western Ganga dynasty and its architecture slightly later. So Western Ganga dynasty comprised the southern part of Karnataka and some parts of Andhra as well. So he married the princesses of Alupa and Western Ganga dynasty. Remember, in those days, marriages were just not out of simple love. It was more to do with understanding between two neighboring kingdoms. So if I wish my kingdom is not invaded or intruded by any other person, especially my neighbor, I may come in alliance with that kingdom by either marrying the daughter or the son of that kingdom. So here he married the princesses of Alupa and the Western Ganga dynasty, and because of these alliances, he developed a huge retinue, because of which he was able to stop the expedition to the south by a king called Harsha from the east and the central part of India. So while Harsha largely ruled from Kannauj, so from Bihar and Madhya Pradesh, he later shifted to Kannauj, which is Uttar Pradesh. So while he took a south expedition, Pulikeshin II stopped him. And now we also understand that Pulikeshin II had a problem with the Pallavas as well. So from the south, though he was able to stop Harsha from the north, he had a lot of problems from the south. So in the war that came later, he was defeated by Narasimhavarman I. So then the Chalukyas had to retreat, and then it was a lull period for them. After that period came Vikramaditya I in the Chalukya dynasty. Between 655 and 680 CE, he took reins of Chalukyas of Badami, and he defeated the Pallava king and was later called Rajamalla. So Vikramaditya the first got the name Rajamalla, whereas we have seen a king who was very strong. He was called Mamalla. Here we have Rajamalla. Then Then came after Vikramaditya the first, came another king, Vikramaditya the second, between 733 and 744 CE, who wanted to avenge the humiliation. So they weren't able to get over the fact that Pulikeshin the two was defeated in the war with the Pallavas. So this Vikramaditya the second also wanted to avenge the humiliation meted to Pallavas before, and he defeated Parameshwaravarman the second. So Parameshwaravarman was a Pallava king who came in the clan of Simhavishnu. Whereas when we deal with Nandivarman came in the clan of Simhavishnu's brother. It was Bhimavarman, and in that clan he came, right? So Parameshwaravarman the second was defeated. Parameshwaravarman did not have a successor. So the brother's line was taken. So we had Nandivarman the second. But when Nandivarman the second came to the position, he was just 13 years of age, and looking at the valor with which Vikramaditya the second fought, he couldn't withstand. So he was taken into the hiding, and he grew up for some time and then later came back. Now Vikramaditya the second made Kanchi also subsidiary to the Badamis, Chalukya Badamis. So once he reached Kanchipuram, he was amazed at the art and architecture of Kanchipuram, looking at the Kailashanatha temple, looking at the Rathams. See, in Pallavas, when I spoke about the Panchapandava Rathams, remember, they have nothing to do with the exact Ratham, which is a chariot. It was not meant to be a chariot at all. So we call it Rathams. So while we dealt with Barabar caves, Karla caves, Udaygiri, Khandagiri caves, it is one entire mountain which has been scooped, and internally you have some polishing done. The other way out is Panchapandava Ratham, which we know in Mamallapuram, Mahabalipuram. You know how it was? It was one huge rock. It was sliced. For example, if I get a cassata ice cream or say a loaf of bread, I would slice it, right? And if I take one piece out, so I will still have two pieces of bread left on either side. So I can sculpt with it. So it was a huge piece of rock. Many cuts were made. Now, if I take one piece of the rock which was cut out, so I have a huge valley between two pieces of stone, right? So each stone which was left was carved into the complex that we saw of the Panchapandava Rathas. So the base is the same. So the Panchapandava Rathas, the shore temple, the beautiful descent of Ganga or Bhagirath's penance, whatever we call it. So, or Arjuna's penance, extremely beautiful Kailashanatha temple. All this was admired by the Chalukyas. Remember, Chalukyas never wanted to destroy Pallava architecture. So they were inspired by it. They didn't cause any harm to Kanchi. They brought the sculptors and the masons who worked on these temples from Kanchipuram and Mahabalipuram, which is Mahamallapuram, all the way to Badami. And now we are going to deal with some of the exquisite rock-cut caves of Badami. So Badami has it is sandstone, but slightly reddish in hue. Now I'm going to talk to you about the cave complex of Badami. So let's go to the first one. If you can see it on your screen, it's a beautiful Nataraja Murti. So in this Nataraja Murti, you have the matted hair locks of Lord Shiva, which also has certain jewelry, which is very unique for Shiva. It's just not matted locks, there is some jewelry. Look at the number of hands. He has got 18, right? So Shiva could be represented with 8 hands. Yentol Isharku tells a Tamil poet. So 8 hands, but here we have 18. So, and look at the hands, they're so naturally sculpted and they are in a certain posture. So he's in a certain Vritta form. And he is also equipped with many weapons. And serving him is a Nandi. Can you see on the left side, there is the protrusion of the Nandi's head. And look at the Nandi, it's not completely coming out. Most of it is with the wall, and the front part of the Nandi alone comes forward to us. And on the other side of Nataraja, we find Ganesha in a very small form. See, what better a place, because it's Vatapi, right? Badami is Vatapi. And Vatapi was famous for Ganapati, for Lord Ganesha. And to the side of Ganesha, we have a Mridangam. And look at the cover for the Mridangam, which has got some scales. So it's done in a very detailed fashion. Now look at the Nataraja Murti. In one of his hands, he holds the Trishulam. And look at the top of the Trishulam. It's not that pointed, but it is different from the Trishulam which was held by Durga in the Kailashanatha temple of Kanchipuram. So there were some differences. So they would have used a mix of the local artisans as well as artisans from Kanchipuram. Now I'm going to take you to another beautiful sculpture. It is in, if I'm right, it is in cave complex 3. In the complex, cave number 3 is where this is. I could be wrong. So you have Varaha, Bhu Varaha. Now we have already witnessed 2 Varahas. One in the Udayagiri caves of the Gupta period, and we've also witnessed a Varaha of the Pallava dynasty. Now we are going to look at the Chalukya dynasty's Varaha. So Varaha very well has a crown. And again, very much like Udayagiri caves, he's still conversing with Bhumi Devi. He's telling her some secrets. It could be the Varaha Puranam. He's holding her here. In the erstwhile Varaha, he was holding her by the thigh. Here he's holding the Kamalam. So the lotus that supports her feet. You have Adisesha below to signify that she was uplifted. So Adisesha is below, within the earth, right? So she's uplifted. So you have Adisesha offering his obeisances. Next to him, it could be Adisesha's wife. We don't know. And we have the Gada on one side where he's holding his hand on the Gada. So this is a Bhuvaraha. Now, if you just look below the Bhuvaraha in the panel, you've got about roughly 6, 7, 8 people with various instruments. They are playing some instruments. So they are celebrating the union of Bhumi Devi with Varaha. So Vedanta Deshika puts this forth in a beautiful verse. Purvam Varaha Vapusha Purushottamena Pritena Bhogi Sadane Samudikshitaya Padahata Pralaya Varidhayastavasan Udvaha Mangala Vidher Buchita Mridanga. So the instruments were played and this union was celebrated that way. So the other way of explanation what Vedanta Deshika says is there were these waves in the ocean that lashed, that created the sound. And there was thunder, there was lightning, they also added to the sound. And all the sound that people heard of nature were nothing but the sound that emanated from the auspicious instruments that was played during the union of Varaha with Bhumi Devi. Now, I'm going to take you to another picture. Can you see it? It is of Trivikrama. So the Lord came as Vamana with a chatram, with an umbrella, and he was offered the 3 pieces of land that he had wanted. So he came as the son of Aditi and Kashyapa as a Vamana. Vamana means one who is a dwarf, whose pituitary gland would have malfunctioned. Now when you look at Vamana, just look below Trivikrama, you find a little boy with an umbrella, he's Vamana. On to his side is a person, an elderly person who's offering Kamandalu Jalam as an agreement of giving those 3 pieces of land. It must be Bali Chakravarti. To his side is a woman. So why should the woman be depicted? Because it was also ritualistic for the man to be with his partner, with his wife when Dhanam is done. So Vindhyavali, which we understand from Puranas is her name, she's standing by the side of Mahabali and there are rishis who are looking at this Dhanam. And on the other side, the story goes from right to left. As a Vamana has received the waters and acceptance from Bali, he grows into Trivikrama. Now look at that Trivikrama. It is very, very similar to Mamallapuram's Trivikrama, because I told you Chalukyas, while defeating the Pallavas, would have brought a lot of sculptors and architects who would have worked on those projects in Kanchipuram and Mamallapuram to Badami in Karnataka. So there is a mimicking. But look at the mimicking, it is done in a very natural way. If you see the chakram onto the left-hand side at the top, it is not straight. It is not this way. It is like this. It is Prayoga Chakram. So Prayoga Chakram is when the chakram is tilted by the Lord to be aimed at somebody who could be antisocial or demoniac in nature. So he has a Prayoga Chakram. He's got other instruments as well. Notably, he's got Sharngam, the bow on his hand. And he's got Nandakam, the sword in the other. and he's pointing his foot, the upraised foot, towards Brahma, who at the top is performing Abhishekam with the Ganga waters from his Kamandalam to the Lord's foot. And there are nakshatras who are pointing towards him. Okay, now this is understandable. If you look at Trivikrama again, there is somebody holding on to his right foot. Can you check who? It was Bali's son Namuchi who sensed that the Lord had come in the shape or the form of a dwarf and has now been increasing in size. So in his fit of ignorance, he thought if he would hold the Lord's foot, the Lord will not expand further. So he's holding the Lord's foot. Namuchi is doing that. Well, when there is Lord Shiva's dance, you have Nandi and the instrument, makes sense. When it is Varaha Avataram, he lifted Mother Earth, so there's a union, there is instruments. But here when the Lord is measuring the worlds by instruments, this could be depictive of Jambavan, because Jambavan is said to have been the experienced bear who lived along with the monkeys in Kishkinta, which is very close to Badami in Karnataka. So Jambavan would have been a very famous name. Jambavan himself tells that when the Lord became Trivikrama, I took a bheri, an instrument, and started playing around it and went around the world telling that the entire world has been measured by the Lord. So to commemorate Jambavan, these instruments and these instrument players could be placed at the bottom. Now I'm going to take you to another painting, sculpture. Can you see it? It's the form of Shiva Vishnu, Hari Hara. So here is Apay Dikshita who says, Pita pata maruna jatam parimaladeham pavitra bhutyangam jala jakaram damarukaram vande yogastham akira yogidyam. So he says on one side is the elephant skin, the other side is the yellow silk. The one who is smeared in ashes, the other one who smells so very well. The one who has got Ganga with him, the other one who has got Jalaja Karam. So the one who is married to Mahalakshmi, who is the daughter of ocean, and Damaru Karam, the one who holds Damaru, the one who is performing yoga, the one who is the repository of all yoga asanas. So this is a comparison which is made here. We have Hari and Hara. Hari on one side, Hara on the other. So there is a place incidentally in Karnataka called Harihar itself, and that has got a Hariharishwara temple. Now I am going to take you to another Vasudeva. See, when we spoke of Gupta dynasty, I also spoke about Devgad. In Devgad, I spoke about Anantashahi Vishnu, Gajendra Moksha, Naranarayana, but I also said that there is Vasudeva, but I didn't show you how. In Badami, we have Vasudeva, who has one foot folded, the other is not extended, but in a relaxed posture, seated on an Adisesha. Look at the Adisesha and look at the coils of the Adisesha below. It is done so naturally to give you a feel of a natural snake with the scales and the slimy, slithery, shiny skin. And the Lord is not exactly in yoga, but he's meditating. And look at the crown. So this crown is not exactly pointed like a kalasham, but it's more flat at the top. When such crowns are assigned in architecture, most historians and researchers opine that the kings had the ability and the interest to shape the crown of the Lord, whomever they're constructing, in the shape of the crown of their kingdom. So this would have been the shape of Chalukya king's crown. So that is what is being done to the Lord. And here also it is Prayoga Chakra. Can you see it? It's slightly bent like this. It's Prayoga Chakra. Now, this one that you're going to see on your screen, it's a simple coil of a snake. And the head of the snake has the Purusha as well, of a male, and then its hoods, and it's projected. You know where it is done in Badami Cave Complex? This is done in the ceiling. Imagine, we don't know what instruments they used. That itself is a big question. But you're going to look to the top and you're going to sculpt. Were there some shields for the eyes to not get affected? How could they do it so beautifully? Imagine doing without electricity or any of the instruments that we know of today to do something like this. This is the epitome of Chalukya architecture. Look at the ceiling. That snake is just marvelous. So it's a 3D like projection, a snake projection that we know of. Well, in the Chalukya dynasty, we have covered to some extent Badami Cave Complex. We are going to go to a very important place, quite close, not very far in Karnataka. It's called Pattadakkal. So just look at this entire panoramic view of how the temples look. So there is a mix of temples with the North Indian architecture and the South Indian architecture, the Dravidian architecture. If you look from the left, you find some Vimanams which are shaped in the Nagara style of architecture, and the next one is shaped like the Kailashanatha temple of Kanchipuram, simply in the Dravidian form of architecture. So it's a mix. Now, how does the Nagara style of architecture Shikhara look? So at the Galaganatha temple, here is the Nagara style of Shikhara. Now, the next picture that I'm going to show you, can you see it? It's a shorter one, but look at the central figure. There is a Shiva with Parvati and Nandi in the circle. This is very, very important in Chalukyan art, because when I'm going to explain Angkor Wat of Cambodia, this is going to be very important. And the final monument that we're going to see in Pattadakkal complex is this Virupaksha temple. Can you see the Virupaksha temple? And you will be reminded of the Kailashanatha temple or the Vaikuntha Perumal temple of Kanchipuram, because again, the sculptors were brought from Kanchipuram here. So it is said, opined by most historians and archaeologists, that this Virupaksha temple in the Pattadakkal complex of Karnataka by the Chalukyas would have been modeled after the Kailashanatha temple in Kanchipuram. Of course, there will be a difference in the material, but the overall structure is quite the same. Now, I'm going to take you to another very important place. So we have been to Badami. We have touched Pattadakkal. Now I'm going to go to a place called Aihole, again in Karnataka. So this is a Durga temple. Can you see the Durga temple? So this Durga temple has nothing to do with goddess Durga. Of course, Durga is very famous in our stone panels, but this temple has nothing to do with Durga. Why? Durga in Sanskrit means fort or fortress, something that protects the inhabitants of the people. In Karnataka, you will be aware, or you might have heard of a place called Chitra Durga. Chitra in Sanskrit means that which is picture or very beautiful. Chitra Durga means that place which has a fortress which is very beautiful. So that is Durga. So incidentally, in Lakshmi Ashtotra, Mahalakshmi is referred to as Navadurga, Mahakali, Brahma Vishnu, Shivatmika. Navadurga means not 9 Durgas. Navadurga means that contemporary or the new form of fortress that Mother Earth is, or Mother Lakshmi is, because she with her mercy is able to protect us from the Lord's punishment. So here is a Durga temple which was like a fortress. Why? Because in many, many military expeditions, the armies were stationed and this was used as a place to shoot at the enemies. So it became a fortress as well. And this temple was initially meant to be a Vishnu Surya temple. And it is in a Gaja Prishtha. Can you see the shape of the Garbhagraham in this picture? This picture has the shape of a Garbhagraham, which is slightly curved at the back. So this is like the back of an elephant. It's a Gaja Prishtha kind of architecture. Now, this picture that I'm going to show is the Lad Khan temple, again in Aihole. Oh, why a temple for a Khan? Don't you think that there is a difference in the tenets of what one religion states from the other? Isn't the places of worship be different? Yes. But this Lad Khan again has nothing to do with a person called Lad Khan. It was actually a Shiva temple, and it was used by a person called Adil Shahi Sultan during this military campaign to keep his retinue and weapons safe. So it's called Lad Khan group. So it's originally a Shiva temple. Now look at the roof. Can you see the roof? So, doesn't it resemble the architecture of something that could have been made out of wood? So I told you the ancient architecture was in the form of wood. So when people started moving towards stronger pieces of material like granite, sandstone, they started aping the wooden architecture style. So if you see those stone-like projections at the top of the roof, it is something very similar to wood. Though it may not be necessary, but it looks very beautiful. And trust me, you have a 1-story, very, very mini room built over this temple. So that's also a marvel. Finally, coming to the best of Aihole, which is its inscription. So what you see is an inscription. It's from the Jain temple at Aihole during the Pulikeshi's time. So there is a shloka which says, how was Pulikeshi born and how did he rule? When did he rule? It says that this particular temple, the Jain temple, was constructed 30 plus 3000 plus 700 plus 5, which is 3735 years after the Bharata war. So if there is some tangible proof in history in written form for Mahabharata to have occurred, most historians point towards this inscription which says that 3735 years after the Bharata war and 50 plus 6 plus 50, which is 556 years of Shaka era and Kali era. So in Kali Yuga you have the Shaka era. So today's Shaka era is 1910, hence 1910 minus 556 is 1354 years ago. The temple was constructed. Thus, the year of inscribing this note is 634 AD. At this time, 3735 years had passed from the Bharata war. So the date of the war comes to 3101 BCE. Correct. So 3735 minus 634 is going to give you 3101 BCE. So that is the date of Mahabharata war, and we decipher or underline or derive this from this inscription. Now I'm going to show you two pictures. Can you see them? They are that of a male and a female. They are an amorous couple. So they are in certain Maithuna positions. So this concept of showing Kama Shastram in temples was also deployed from then. When we deal with Odisha and Khajuraho, we will deal in detail about what these positions are and why this was done. So you're able to relate to Chalukyan dynasty to three places, which is Badami, Pattadakkal and Aihole. Now, as we have completed Chalukyas, we need to go to a very, very strong kingdom like the Chalukyas. They were the Rashtrakutas. So one of the most prominent kings who was the founder of this kingdom as well was Danti Durga, who ruled between 735 and 756 AD, which is CE. He defeated the Chalukyas. So he helped his son-in-law Nandivarman. So his son-in-law, Rashtrakuta's son-in-law, was Nandivarman. You remember Nandivarman at the age of 13, who came in the brothers' line of succession, fled Kanchi. So his father-in-law was Nandi Durga. So Nandi Durga along with the son-in-law, Danti Durga along with the son-in-law Nandivarman wanted to regain Kanchi from Chalukyas. This was done, and then further next in around 756 to 774 CE is when we come across a Rashtrakuta king called as Krishna the First, who brought the eastern Chalukyas and the Gangas of Talakad under his control. So I mentioned while mentioning Chalukyas is just not one regime. We have Badami Chalukyas, you have got the western Chalukyas, you've got the eastern Chalukyas. Western often referred to as Kalyani or Chalukyas of the south. So then he brought Krishna the First brought eastern Chalukyas and Gangas of Talakad under his control. Next, we are going to deal with another king of the same dynasty who was called Amoghavrsha the First. He is said to have ruled between 814 and 878 CE, and he made peace with the Western Ganga dynasty by giving his daughters in marriage. So his daughters were married to the king of the Western Ganga dynasty. Now we are going to deal with a temple which belongs to Danti Durga's time, but it was not completed during his period. It was completed during Krishna the First period. Katha Kalpataru is a beautiful Marathi book of the 15th century which tells about a story. It says that a queen who saw her husband suffering from a unique ailment, she prayed that if her suffering husband is cured, then she would construct a temple. And until she finishes the construction of the temple, she will fast. So the ministers and the well-wishers of the king were absolutely shocked with the queen's decision, but they couldn't speak against her. So then they went to sculptors to understand how long will it take for a temple be constructed. He gave a calculation in years. That is when they found an architect who agreed to do it. You know what he did? He went to a hill and started sculpting it from the top. It was not from the bottom. From the top, he started sculpting. So that is a very, very unique thing for temple construction. Now, artisans and sculptors from Pattadakkal and Kanchipuram were used in this construction. Now I'm going to show you one Gajalakshmi. So this Gajalakshmi could have been inspired by the Gajalakshmi in Mamallapuram in Tamil Nadu by the Pallavas. But one major difference is both the elephants are, it's more static rather than showing a story. Both the elephants are showering waters on Gajalakshmi, and Gajalakshmi is with folded legs, seated in a perfect pose to give serene and sattvic guna to the person who meditates. Now, I will take you through this picture. Can you see it? It's a beautiful Lord Shiva with Parvati on Ekasimhasanam. Then there are people on either sides, could be Ganas or could be Devas. There were many, many Ganas at the bottom. But who is lifting the asanam of Shiva and Parvati? It is none but Ravana, because Ravana is shown with many heads and he is showing his back towards us, and with all his hands and might he is trying to lift Kailasha. So this is so depictable. Can you just see his knee, Lord Shiva's knee? It is carved so beautifully to give a natural look. Now, I am going to take you through this panel. I mentioned about the temple from where the queen, with her request, the sculptors started sculpting from the top. That place is in Ellora. So, can you see in Ellora, this is a panel in the temple which shows Ramayana and Mahabharata. Small incidents, important incidents, all depicted in such short dimension. So, this is a beautiful Ramayana and Mahabharata panel. Now I'm going to show you the top view of the temple. So can you see the top view? You will be surprised, this is not built out of many stones. It's a monolith. It's a single stone, which is the hill itself. So there were cuts made and the sculpting started from the top. Why was it done from the top? Because the queen had promised that if she finds her husband cured, she will fast until she sees the completion of the temple with the shikhara at the top. So to save her and to prevent her death, the king sought the architect's help, who started sculpting from the top. Now can you see the various layers? Just imagine it's a huge hill, you're scooping it in the middle, and then from the monolith you're trying to sculpt. What better? There's no gumming material at all. There's no binding material at all. Now I'm going to show you the other picture. Can you see the picture? There's sunlight on it. There's a beautiful Vimanam at the back. There is a roof, a ceiling to the Ardha Mandapam and the Mahamandapam. And you can see beautiful animals carved at the top. And there are smaller miniature shrines or gopurams on either sides. When we get into the temple and do a pradakshinam, how does the pradakshinam path look? Can you see this picture? So it is as if in a cave that I'm walking with many pillars on one side and many, many elephants on the other side. So either it could be the elephants, the cardinal elephants, or because the earlier kings were Buddhists and in Buddhism, elephant holds a lot of respect, it could be the elephants again. Now, can you see this picture? It's again that of Lord Nataraja, like Badami that we have seen. And there are celestials watching him dance. There are these wives or the ladies, I don't know who they are, they could be the wives or the attendants. They are watching Lord Shiva with all awe. And there are other devas on either side who are witness to this act. So this is a beautiful Nataraja Murti in Ellora of the Rashtrakuta period. Now, let's look at the marriage of Lord Shiva and Parvati. Can you see Lord Shiva's marriage to Parvati, and who is doing the rituals? Brahma is doing the rituals at the bottom, and all the devas are witness to this divine celestial marriage. And here Shiva carries a upavitam. He carries the sacred thread. In fact, in Parashurameshwara temple in Gudimallam, in the phallus, when we saw an image of Shiva, he was not carrying the sacred thread. Now that we have roughly understood the Chalukyan dynasty, the Rashtrakuta dynasty, now we are going to go to the Western Chalukya dynasty. So Western Chalukya, we have one famous king called Someshwara the First. He was the most brilliant among all, but had problems with the Cholas. So his younger son Vikramaditya the Sixth expanded kingdom till Bengal, while his older son Someshwara the Second did not like his brother. So Vikramaditya the Sixth was the younger one, very, very talented, very energetic and very valorous, whereas Someshwara the Two, the other brother, did not like this. So the younger son was married to the daughter of Veerarajendra Chola. So upon his marriage, upon the Chola's death, he made his brother-in-law Adhirajendra the king. And this was not liked by Kulottunga Chola the First, who teamed with Someshwara the Second and others to fight Vikramaditya the Sixth. but the latter was victorious. Hence, he was called Tribhuvanamalla. So we've seen Mamalla, Rajamalla, and Tribhuvanamalla now. His regime is described by Bilhana in Vikramanka Deva Charita. Like how Harsha, we have Harsha Charitam. For Vikramaditya, we have Vikramanka Deva Charitam by Bilhana. Can you see it? Now, these Western Chalukyas were the front runners in using lathe turned pillars. They will be so circular, so very well polished, dimension wise, absolutely perfect and impeccable. So they were the first to use lathe turned pillars and started with soapstone. So if you look at the soapstone, this was the material that was used then. Can you see the soapstone? Yeah, so this is the material. Now they also started using Kirti Mukha, a demon-like face, as decorations. I want to show you the first picture. Can you see it? So there are beautiful, it may look quite ferocious, but to give that taste of a temple, they wanted to have these demoniac faces as well. Kirti Mukha, can you see at the top? Again at the bottom? Now I'm going to show you another Kirti Mukha, which is very interesting. In the panel, you have a Kirti Mukha and a beautiful man, in my understanding, playing the Mridangam, and below which is a support like Shikhara thing. It is very, very depictive of the Gopuram or the Shikhara. Now I'm going to show you the Siddheshwara temple in Haveri, Karnataka. Can you see the picture? And you can also see in the next picture the various Kirti Mukhas that have been used by the Western Chalukyas in their temples. Now, here we go to Kashi Vishveshwara temple in Lakundi. So there is a Kirti Mukha on either side. It is a Dvikuta. So Shiva to east and Surya to west. So there are two Garbhagrams facing each other. There is Shiva facing the east, Surya facing the west. So it's a Dvikuta temple in terms of Garbhagram construction. Now there are beautifully carved doors and lathe turned polished pillars. Can you see it? So it is so shining, and look at the entrance of the door. Though it's not as exquisite as what later Cholas we are going to discuss, but they were the front runners in getting these sculptures also done in the stone. I'll show you two photographs of pillars in such Western Chalukya dynasty kings. So can you see the pillar? Look at this. It is lathe turned, it is circular, and look at the amount of detailing that has gone into every level. It looks beautiful. Can you see it? And on the other side, same picture, if you can see the pillar on the mandapam, it is more square in nature. Now let's look at this picture as well. So here we have again a very, very, very beautifully sculpted pillar. So if I can think of somebody who got very close to it, or even better, are the Kakatiyas of Warangal. When we discuss Kakatiyas, we'll get into Ramappa temple. So this is a beautifully carved temple, very, very beautiful. Now in Dodda Basappa temple, can you see the Dodda Basappa temple? So it is a 12th century temple in Dambal in Koppal district of Karnataka. There is a Garbhagraham, there is a sanctum, and opposite that is a hall, a mandapam, and they are connected by a vestibule. So if you go to Indian Railway coaches, they are connected right through a vestibule. So they are connected by a vestibule. And this temple follows the northern Bhumija style of architecture. So there is an architecture called Bhumija. So this temple follows that. So there will be a miniature spires, horizontal and vertical everywhere. I'll show you this picture. Can you see this picture? So you find many small panels or mini shikharas, which are smaller temples within the walls of the temple. And the star points for equidistant projections. And this one is a 24-pointed stellate plan. Look at this beautifully done wall relief with projections and mini shikharas. Can you zoom it? So if you can zoom it, you can check how beautiful these mini shikharas are. Okay, now I'm going to go to the Western Ganga dynasty. In the Western Ganga dynasty, even before I could begin, Bhadrabahu is regarded as the last Acharya of Shvetambara and for some by Digambara sect. His period is 367 to 298 BCE. He answered the dream of Chandragupta Maurya in 16 reasonings. So his entire dream of Chandragupta Maurya was explained from his standpoint of view. Now, both of them, they migrated to Shravana Belagola because the Gupta dynasty was on the decline. So both of them, Bhadrabahu as well as Chandragupta Maurya, they migrated to Shravana Belagola in Karnataka and they died there. Here is a 58 feet tall monolithic statue on the Vindhyagiri hill. So in Shravanabelagola in Karnataka, this is called Vindhyagiri hill. And there you've got a 58 tall monolithic statue. In this world, as much as I know, this is going to be the world's tallest statue on a monolith stone. If it's various pieces, you may have larger, many more performances or many more reasonings. But look at this Bhadrabahu, it is so beautiful. Now, in the Western Ganga dynasty, this lasted between 350 and 1000 AD. This is the entire period. It's a long period. But they were not too strong. They managed to sustain for a very long time. There is a famous king called Butuga II, who ruled between 938 and 961 AD. He helped the Rashtrakuta king Amoghavasha III regain many lost territories. Thus, Butuga II became the son-in-law to the Rashtrakuta king. So we have seen a Pallava who is the son-in-law to the Rashtrakutas. Now we are seeing a Western Ganga dynasty person who is the son-in-law to the Rashtrakutas. So there is this famous mention in history called the famous Battle of Takkolam. So this king, Butuga II, helped the Rashtrakutas in defeating the Cholas by killing Rajaaditya Chola. So after the killing of Rajaaditya Chola, it took some time for them to come up with another set of Chola kings who were again powerful. So Butuga II and minister Chavundaraya were staunch Jains. So in this Western Ganga dynasty, we come across Jainism. And the minister constructed a famous stay place of Jains called Chavundaraya Basadi. So he has a special place, you can see that. And the king patronized Gomateshwara. So this Gomateshwara is who is referred to as Bhadrabahu, and he was roughly constructed during that period. You can assign a period, say about 8th, 9th and 10th centuries. There would have been some additions in the 11th and 12th century as well. But to imagine this is a monolith stone so high, how they would have done, it's beautiful, it's atop a hill. And something very unique to this Bhadrabahu for the Jains is there is a Mahamastaka which is performed once in 12 years. So once in 12 years, I think it was in 2018 last. So the next one could be in 2030 or it could be in 2009. It could have been in 2019, I'm not aware. So this Mahamastaka then performed brings a lot of Jains and many Hindus also together. So I'm going to show you a simple clip of how this Mahamastaka was done in the last period. Can you see it? Now that we have spent a lot of time on Rashtrakutas, the Chalukyas, the Western Ganga dynasty, the Pallavas, now let's shift slightly to the western part of India, a bit of the central part and the northwestern part. Here was a kingdom called the Gurjara Pratihara dynasty. And they had vassals, they had people who served them from various other provinces. One set, they were called Chandelas of Bundelkhand. So they constructed the famous, very, very famous Khajuraho complex of temples. So Khajuraho is very, very famous. And in this dynasty, there was a very famous king called Yashovarman of the Chandelas who worked under Gurjara Pratiharas. He constructed the Lakshmana temple of Khajuraho. Now I'm going to show you the Lakshmana temple. Can you see it? And a special mention, those of you who are Bitsians, you will be reminded of the very famous Saraswati Jika temple within the Pilani premises. So most Birla temples made of white marbles followed this style of architecture. It's a Nagara architecture. Some of which could be found in the Ganga dynasty. When we discuss Odisha and Kalinga architecture, we'll discuss that as well. So there's a mix. So Kalinga uses some Dravidian and some Nagara. Here it's completely Nagara architecture. So there's a shikhara at the top. If you can see, it's like a spiking tower. You can see it? Now I'm going to show you something very unique in this Lakshmana temple of Khajuraho. You know what is this? It's a wild boar. Where is the wild boar coming into picture? This is Varaha Murti. So we have seen a Varaha in the Chalukya dynasty. We have seen a Varaha in the Gupta dynasty. We have seen a Varaha in the Pallava dynasty. All of them had the human torso and the head of a Varaha, a wild boar. Here it's completely Varaha. Can you see it? And let me zoom to the body of this particular Varaha. What you see are rows of many celestials and maharishis sitting together and reciting hymns from the Vedas to praise Varahamurti, the avatar of Lord Vishnu. Can you see it? Look at the architecture. I'm amazed. Look at the size of this. This is a monolith. Look at the size of this wild boar. Look at the workmanship that has gone into it. Let's look at one of its limbs. Can you see its limbs? So there is a Maharishi who's worshipping. You can see the Maharishi. He's putting his palms together and he's performing penance. And look at the mouth of this Varaha. There is a Devi who has been inscribed. And then there are two holes like the nostrils. So this is very unique of the Khajuraho, especially the Lakshmana temple. Now I'm going to go to the most famous of all Khajuraho temples. It's the Kandariya Mahadeva temple in Khajuraho. It is the grandest of all. It is the grandest of all. It was built during the reign of Vidyadhara between 1003 and 1035 CE. Now, later it was Mahmud of Ghazni who attacked this town, and Ibn al-Athir, a historian, records it. So nobody else records that Ghazni attacked and ruined this many temples of this particular Khajuraho is recorded by yet another noted Arab historian, al-Athir. So he records it and says Ghazni destroyed it. But what we have left itself is so beautiful. Now I'm going to show you the overall structure of how this temple looks. Can you see an overall picture? It looks very similar to the Lakshmana temple, but it's much a way bigger, and the sculptures are exquisite. So that the one that we saw previously, the Lakshmana temple, happened during the early years of Gurjara Parihara, the Chandelas. This happened during the later period, so it evolved. So there was a raised platform and then there is a temple. Now I'm going to show you some pictures from the stone panels of this Kandariya Mahadeva temple. Can you see it? So you can see it for yourself. So these sculptures speak for themselves, and I'm sure most of you who are in your teenage or above the teenage will understand what these pictures are. They talk about various sexual positions. It's called Maithunam. Now we need to. Often this is a question asked in many of the conclaves and discussions to me and to a lot of you. If a temple is meant to be sacrosanct, and something where you connect with Paramatma, the Jivatma connects with Paramatma, why should you have such sexually exploiting and depicting sculptures in temples? There are various reasons. Hinduism is not just a way that tells you that you pray on this particular day in this temple. No, it talks about the method, the method in which one's life evolves. So there is dharma, artha, kama, moksha. They are called the purusharthas. So I am righteous. I am very generous and magnanimous to my society. One. Second, after this generosity, we have kama, because I get married, and together the husband and the wife together, being an institution, the marriage that binds them, are going to engage in processes that are going to help create progeny. Next is artha, which is where I start earning money in the righteous ways for my family and to help the society as well. And finally, I seek emancipation or realization of moksha. So dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So these are the purusharthas, and when you go to a temple, you're charitable to people, you help the priest, you help the people there's a community which is dependent on the temple, you're in dharma, and you pray the Lord for your artha to rise, your wealth to rise, and you seek good peace in your family life, in your marital life, which is kama, and you also finally seek salvation, which is moksha. So all this is depicted in a temple because a temple encompasses all of this. There's another reason. Wars were fought with prior or no announcements in those days. So while the men used to go with their entire retinue and fight, there was high probability that a person could die because it's 50% chances whether you survive or not. So when a large section of the men in the losing side die, their wives become widows and they will have little children, and those children, when they are married, need to be advised as to how life is and what sexual education is or what is sex education. So to depict this, today we have internet, we have books. But in those days, when women were a bit embarrassed or shy to explain all this to their children, be it the boy or the girl, they would say, go worship the Lord and come and do a pradakshina. When they were doing a pradakshina, they would get an idea of how the man and the woman concept works. But some pictures that I show here are again very controversial today because you see men engaged in sexual relationship with animals too. It's wrong, but that is also shown. If that were to be hidden, probably it was prevalent in those days, it is prevalent these days as well, right? So they wanted to be as realistic as possible. This is not to say this is right or this is wrong. This was what was prevalent then. And you also find some same gender relationships in these sculptures and many people involved in this particular position. So if we have to understand Hinduism and architecture, it was just not reflecting one's thought, it was also showing the society's claims in relationships. Not that anything of this is said that this is right or this is wrong. We need to apply our own thought process and check what is good in the current day's scenario and world. But temples were very blunt in depicting what were the possibilities. So I'm not going to detail more on this. These positions have been described in detail by Vatsyayana, who belonged to the 2nd and the 3rd century CE in Kama Sutram. So you can refer to that. So I've covered the Chandelas, and now I'm going to go to Chaulalukyas. The Chaululukya dynasty, they followed a certain architecture style called the Maru Gurjara architecture style. So again, I'm keeping myself to Gujarat, the lower parts of Rajasthan, the western part of Madhya Pradesh, and the topmost part of Maharashtra. So this is where Chaululukya dynasty ruled. This is Chaululukya. This is Chaulukya, that is Charlukya. So Chalukyas of Badami, Chalukyas western, eastern, they were different. This is Chaulukyas. So the best example is the Sun Temple at Modhera in Mehsana district of Gujarat. So this is a very good example. In Gujarat, in the Mehsana district, there is a Sun Temple. It was built during the reign of one of the famous kings of Chaulukya dynasty. He was called Bhima I, who is said to have ruled between 1022 and 1064 CE. So in this temple, we have a Garbhagraham, a Gudha Mantapam, a Sabha Mantapam, and a Kunda. Now I'm going to show you a panoramic view of this temple. Can you see? There is beautifully laid, it's like a stepwell, but many, many beautiful steps. It's like a temple tank, and to the temple tank is the temple that you see above. I'm going to show you a close-up of the temple. Can you see the close-up? Yeah. So the close-up is exquisite, and there is a ceiling. How is the ceiling? So the ceiling in the 11th century evolved much better in the 12th and the 13th centuries when we go to Hoysalas in the south. So look at the ceiling. Can you even imagine what kind of instruments would have been used to sculpt this in the ceiling? I'm amazed. This is all I can say. It's not an exaggeration, or I'm not trying to overshow my emotions, but I'm amazed. Look at the handwork that is being done on the ceiling. It's amazing. So this is an example, a typical example of a Maru Gurjara temple. Now I spoke about the Sun Temple, right? So the Sun Temple is very famous. You deal with Sun Temple here in Modhera. Later we'll deal that at Konark in the Kalinga style. There was supposed to be a very, very beautiful temple of Lord Surya in Mulasthana, which is Multan in Pakistan, but was later completely razed, destroyed completely, because this temple has found mention in Al-Biruni's text, the Arab traveler's text. So Sun temples were very common. Later when I talk about Kashmir, I'm going to talk about another Martanda Surya temple there as well. So in this temple of Modhera of Chaulukya dynasty, the rays of the sun It has been built in such a way that the rays of the sun would directly fall on Surya image on equinox days. So equinox is when you have equal days and equal nights, the sun's rays will exactly fall on Surya. Now, while I spoke different dynasties, I was giving you hints. When I spoke of Pallava dynasty, I said, remember Ashtabhuja with 8 hands, the west-facing Ashtanga Vimana. And then when I spoke about the Pattadakkal complex, I said, look at the central figure in the Shikhara. That's very important when we deal with Cambodia. And now I'm telling you, make note of this. The sun's rays directly fall on Surya's image housed in the Garbhagriha on equinox days. This is also very important when we deal with Cambodia. So Cambodia is going to be the pinnacle of how outside of India's architecture in Kambuja Desham prospered. Now, this particular temple is built very close to the Tropic of Cancer. It's not exactly on the Tropic of Cancer in Modhera, it's very close to the Tropic of Cancer. Now, in the same Maru Gurjara architecture style, I'm going to show you another beautiful monument. Now, before showing you that monument, I'll show you where this is going to be. Can you see the 100 rupee Indian note? It's a currency, Indian currency. After the demonetization, here is the new 100 rupee note. The color is changed. The size is different. Can you see something in this 100 rupee note? It depicts something. What is that? That is called the Rani Ki Vav. It is a vav. It is a stepwell constructed by a Rani, a queen. Who constructed this? When? So we speak about gifts by husbands to their spouses, their wives, or vice versa, the wife gifting the husband. So this is one of the earliest beautiful gifts that we have ever known of a wife giving to the husband. So I keep telling my wife, construct one like this for me. So, but you need acres and acres of land, and you need the best of the artisans. We have lost all of them with our ancient architecture. I'm sure we can't find people like this now. So this is Rani Ki Vav. So Bhima the first, whom we discussed in the Sun Temple at Modhera, his wife Udayamati is said to have got this constructed either as a gift, larger theory, a smaller theory, in memory of Bhima the first after his death. We don't know. But the theory of gifting the husband holds more good because it was constructed in 1032 CE when the king was still living, because his regime lasted till 1064 CE. So it must have been a gift. Now look at the Rani Ki Vav. So can you see it? So this Rani Ki Vav was basically meant for storing water. So water would come from all places where it would rain, and they will fill the stepwell. And as water gets evaporated during the summer season, the travelers by used to come and stay in the mandapams at the top and would get their daily activities done with the water. They never used to pollute the water. They used to bring vessels along and they used to fetch the water and go. So since Gujarat and Rajasthan and some parts of Madhya Pradesh are generally arid regions, such stepwells are very common. And of all the stepwells that I've known, because when we deal with Vijayanagara dynasty, we come across 2 stepwells. I won't be showing one of them to you. It's a very simple one. It's near Kanchipuram in Ayangarkulam. There is another stepwell which is in Hampi itself, which is very beautiful. But this stepwell of Rani Ki Vav is the best stepwell because the sculptures are beautiful. I'm going to show you some of the sculptures. This is how the panel looks. I'll show you the picture that you see is, you can see the layers, the panels done, right? The sculptures. It's all in the stepwell. What was meant to store water, I'm sure I could have been one of the droplets of water. At least I could have had touched those beautiful sculptures. So again, I'm going to show you Bhuvaraha Murti. Can you see Bhuvaraha here? So there are women attending on either sides. There is a central Bhuvaraha figure with a panel around, and there is the depiction of Dashavataram in the panel. And centrally here is Bhuvaraha. And look at his chakram. So he holds a shankham in one hand. Look at the way he inserts his fingers into the shankham, the conch, and is holding it. And just below that, can you see the chakram? He holds it as if he's holding a frisbee, a disc. that style. And the way he folds one of his foot, keeps it on the petal of a lotus, supported by women who are holding the stalk together. Can you see it? And these women are also twined. If you can look at them, they depict the Naga Kanyakas. And the Lord is holding the other hand he's holding it straight. And look at the ornamentation to his kacham, to his lower dhoti. Okay, I'm going to show you another picture. So we are done with too many Bhuvarahas. I'm going to show you for a change. And we have also done with too many Trivikramas. Now I'm going to show you a Vamana. So we've already seen a Vamana in the cave complex of Badami of the Chalukyas. Now I'm showing you from this dynasty. So can you see Vamana? He holds the umbrella. And now there is a halo behind him. Again, a panel of the Dashavataram. And look at his tummy. This tummy goes so well deep that the shadow of the tummy will fall on the loincloth below. And look at those legs. They are so bulky. So he was very bulky, very chubby, very cute, but very short. So this is Vamana for us. Now, I will show you, if you can see this depiction. So it could be Parashurama because he holds a parashu. It could also be Lord Shiva because Lord Shiva also holds the parashu. We don't know exactly who. But if you look at the bow, because it could be Pinaki or it could be Parashurama's bow. But generally Parashurama is depicted with beard. So we can conclude easily that this is Lord Shiva. Right? Now I'm going to show you the next panel. Very, very unique. You know, somebody is riding the horse. And so we have him holding a sword. Somebody is holding the chatram. You know, what is this? This is Kalki Avataram of Vishnu. So they have envisioned what has been mentioned in Kalki Purana and Bhavishya Purana, and they have done this Kalki Avataram there as well. So this is like 1,000 years before that we are. Again, a very famous, we have seen Mahishasura Mardhini during the times of Pallava. And now we're going to show you of this dynasty. And you can see the Chaulukya's depiction of Mahishasura Mardhini. So here is a Mahisha, the buffalo, which seems to be crushed. Right? And there is the lion of Durga that's pouncing on the Mahisha from its back. And there is a panel, there is an arch behind Durga. We can't see that very clearly, but we can see her holding so many hands with very, very clear weapons. And look at the ornamentation that is done on her upper torso. So the earlier depiction of women, if you remember the Digarganj Yakshi, so they had no cloth on the top. Now we see some kind of ornamentation that has happened on her bosoms. And look at her earrings, so circular, which is very depictive of the central and the northern part of India. If you look at the Punjabi women, they have those rings. Whereas when you come to south, you don't find so many rings, they are kundalams. Yeah? So this is another depiction. So whatever I've shown you of Vamana, of Lord Shiva, of Kalki, of Varaha, of Mahishasura Mardhini, all is in this Rani Ki Vav. So there are like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of the sculptures, and all of it is going to be submerged in rainwater. And this was what it is meant for, and we had such good aesthetics even for a stepwell. So this is what we wear.